So you can't have a enterprise social conversation without bringing up SharePoint. It's out there, and for many organizations, it's embedded in their organization, and they're being in some cases forced to use SharePoint. In some cases, it's the right solution. Dion, our question today, though, is: have we reached peak SharePoint? Has SharePoint hit a tipping point, if you will?
Has it plateaued, or is it in decline? I mean, that's the big question. And we certainly see, I've seen for years that there's been a lot of migration off of SharePoint. Microsoft hasn't always been the greatest steward of the platform, and it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's the #1 collaboration and document management platform deployed worldwide. 80% of organizations have licenses for it, and almost every time we look at a large organization, the first question is, we've already have this and paid for it. Why isn't this good enough? And so SharePoint gets an inordinate amount of attention, despite that it isn't actually used that much in organizations. And there's been some terrible data out there. AIM, the American Institute for Information Management, has shown that successive SharePoint deployments have hovered in the low double digits. 11% a couple years ago. I think it's gone up a little bit since then. So the question is, does SharePoint have legs? Is it a modern enough tool? I mean, I'd say that it's aging. It's not really very social. It has some social features, don't get me wrong. But I do know, and I have been talking recently with the SharePoint team, they're committed to standing the platform back up and really reinvigorating it. And so we're going to see where that takes us. So it may have plateaued recently, but I think we might see another era of SharePoint.
Tony?
Yeah, I think we've totally reached the era of peak SharePoint. In fact, I think it probably happened in the 2013-2014 cycle, and we're now on a long but probably very slow slope of decline over the next decade, maybe 2 decades. For a long time, everyone was looking for a SharePoint killer, and the real SharePoint killer at the end was Office 365. Microsoft rather abruptly tried to push everyone to the cloud in the 2010 and then increasingly the 2013 timeframe. They had reasons to do this related more to Wall Street than their customers. But what happened was, Diane talked about stewardship, was that Redmond had no real migration path to the cloud and no real plausible hybrid options. This was one of the single most unconscionable vendor acts I've seen from a vendor in the last 2 decades who wasn't named Autonomy or CA. It was incredible, and there was incredible pushback from their customers who had been encouraged by Microsoft to build these huge on-premise estates. So yeah, recently Microsoft has conceded that maybe on-prem still matters and have more of a transition path, but I think the gig's up, and we see this among our own subscriber base where particularly larger enterprises are putting narrower and narrower fences around SharePoint, and you can advance to the next slide and you'll see that some surveys have borne this out. So this is a survey we did primarily larger enterprises where, about 2 in 5 profess loyalty to SharePoint. They're hanging in there. But 2 in 5 are also aggressively supplementing SharePoint, which I think is a topic we'll come back to later in the debate. 23% are decidedly moving away from SharePoint, and 25% are undecided. Now these are more than 100% because you can actually pick 2 of these at one time. But you can see here that with the some of the data that Dion shared, that there's some disappointment, and I think people are really asking themselves, and Office 365 has certainly called the question, am I really getting the value out of this, and is this really where I want to hang my hat, my collaboration hat over the next decade? And I think increasingly the answer is no.